Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. It's your gal, Juliberry. I just got out of the shower, but I put in my butterfly clips and I'm here for the good vibes tonight. Hello, everybody. Homer, Jade, Simpson, Watson. Welcome to the stream. Christy May, how you doing? B and Pepper Cat Dog. And hi, Danny. Hello, hello. Ah! Oh my gosh, guys. Get ready for this one. Oh, no, you. See, Buzzbert calls you out and says, no, you. If you call me pretty, you gotta Uno reverse immediately. Oh my goodness. Love the hair clips. Thank you. I got them from Walgreens. So if you got a little thing over there, got a little Walgreens, you can get yourself some butterfly clips too. I got my water. I got the fanfic pulled up. We are reading chapter 5 of, I was about to say the gray man. It is the pink man. And yo, SBI Sunday, woo! Oh my goodness. Also, Pepper. Oh my goodness. Hi, Hidden Mask. How are you? Look at all the little Filza. Pepper, you being here just reminded me. I went through a little purge on the Discord for people who didn't have an age roll, and I didn't want to give you one because you gotta pick your own age roll. So like anyone who didn't have an age roll was kicked from the Discord, but you are free to rejoin. I'll go ahead and put the link out for you. I know it's just because I didn't inactivity was a big thing, and I want to make sure no one's not a bot. So, if you got kicked from the Discord, you are free to join again. Just make sure you choose an age roll. But yeah, mwah, loves to you all. Hi, RV. You spooked the dog that I'm watching for my friend. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to spook your friend's dog. Holy moly. Oh my gosh. Yee, fair enough. Yeah. Guys, this chapter's a doozy. I'm not gonna lie. This one's kind of a doozy. I hope y'all have brought a box of tissues and a blanket maybe. I don't know what. Dude, I love these little googly eyes. Do y'all remember when I named my microphone? If you do, you're an OG. But I'll go ahead and say it's oh shoot. It's like Michael Winston or something. Michael Winston? I remember it being Winston. Am I going to cry? Maybe. Oh, hell, I haven't caught up. Whoops. That's okay. If you've seen The Gray Man, you basically know how the movie goes. But oh my golly. I am so excited to get into this chapter, so why don't we just do a little oh yeah, baby. I'm completely clueless. Hi, completely clueless. I'm Julie. Shazam. Alright. Obviously, we are reading The Pink Man, written by Danny Art Online and moi. Okay, so problem. My Discord is so broken. Let me choose any roles. Pepper, if you want to message me privately and tell me what roles you want, I'll give them to you. Like, or even like add a mod or something. Like, whatever you need. I'm sorry Discord's broken. It's broken for RB too for some reason, so shout out to Discord support. I say sarcastically. Oh man. All right. But yeah. Yeah, of course, Pepper. It's no problem. Okay. So oh. All right. Are we ready? Cuz I'm ready. I'm getting my lore voice ready. Me. All right, The Pink Man, Chapter 5. Content warning for self-sacrifice and minor character death. So, if you need to step away, you are a-okay. But yeah. If you want to know what happened last episode or last chapter, you can go ahead over to the VODs channel and check out the SBI Sunday full playlist, so no worries. Prague in January wasn't always the sunniest, But as Puffy sank deeper into her leather lounge chair, she couldn't help but feel thankful at the first hints of sunlight that managed to sneak through the clouds, beaming through her apartment's round window and soaking in her warmth. Hints of music floated up from behind her, a record spinning on its player near the kitchen, and Puffy let out a tiny sigh and closed her eyes as she kicked her feet up on a stool in front of her. She'd been playing this one a lot lately, since it had been a gift, and she could still see her pseudo-nephew beaming up at her as he handed it over, a bright smile on his face. It only made sense, since she had been the one to buy him his first record player, and she found herself coming back to the album more and more as her time began running short, as if it was time spent with him she'd never get enough of. Yikes. I'm gonna turn the music down a bit. The C418 is too powerful for my ears. I know I'm not mentally prepared for this, but I'm excited. Yes, as you should. She took another long breath into her oxygen mask, feeling the air fill up her slowly. Her lungs had begun failing her a while back, a side effect of all the smoking she'd done over the years. But the stress of her job had made it almost impossible to quit. She'd saved people. She'd done her civic duty. But still, it would have been nice to have a little more time. Then, just as she was starting to feel at peace, the apartment's buzzer went off, causing Puffy to sit up a little straighter. Thank you for the lurk, Manny. Thank you. Sitting up a little straighter, pulling the mask off of her face and setting it down on the side table. She glanced over her shoulder cautiously, a feeling of unease percolating over the back of her neck. She didn't get unexpected visitors, and it's not as if she'd ordered any packages she'd need to sign for. Although she had gotten one package in particular the day prior that needed special looking after. Suspicion seeped into her bones as she slowly reached a hand out to flick open the clasp of the chest beside her and pulled out a small handgun. The buzzer rang again, impatiently this time, and she rolled her eyes a little as she pushed herself out of the chair, walking breezily toward the kitchen to where the security camera display sat on her wall. Puffy narrowed her eyes as she zeroed in on the figure standing in front of her narrowed her eyes as she zeroed in on the figure standing at the foot of her down, jamming his finger into the buzzer once more as glanced. What am I saying? Jamming his finger into the buzzer once more as he glanced around himself cautiously. There it is. She didn't recognize him, and he seemed a bit jumpy and out of place, tension written all over his face. Did I read face twice? Hold on. She didn't recognize him, and he seemed a bit jumpy and out of place, tension written all over his face. Oh my gosh, Danny was a poet and she didn't even know it. She just made a rhyme. Shout out to Danny. When's poetry night? Still, as she pushed down on the speaker button to talk to him, some of his nerves seemed to ebb away at the sound of her voice. Yes? She asked, watching as the tall, curly-haired boy ducked his head to stare at the door handle in front of him, as if suddenly expecting it to burst open. Have you tried aluminum sliding? He replied cautiously. Ah, an agent. This wasn't really a surprise to her. After her gift in the mail, she figured it wouldn't be long until someone from the CIA showed up at her front door. She'd just been expecting someone taller with long pink hair, who constantly glared into her camera lens every time she left him waiting at the door. I prefer fiberglass, she said finally, answering the coded message with ease. At least you don't have to paint, the mysterious agent finished softly. Puffy lowered her gun away from her chest, narrowing her eyes at the unfamiliar figure as she stated, Your Berlin station. It wasn't really a question, but the tone of her voice still made it clear that she was asking, What are you doing here? There was a brief pause as the boy suddenly looked up into the security camera, as if staring right at her, glasses flashing briefly with reflective light. Then he quickly looked away, disappointment bleeding into his features as he muttered, Until this morning, before casting another cautious glance over his shoulder and quietly stating, I'm here with Blade. Blade. She hadn't seen him since London, since 2 years ago, since Tommy and Phil in Hong Kong. They'd spoken briefly a couple times, but other than that, she'd been mostly in the dark about what he was up to. That's what happened when you retired. You became distant and unavailable and useless. Well, maybe not completely useless. Where is he? She asked curiously. The agent at her door glanced directly into the camera again, only this time, he shot her a tight-lipped smile, amusement tugging at his previously tense expression before he said, "The trunk." Buffy immediately felt a laugh rise out of her chest, a chuckle she hadn't heard in ages falling off her lips at the image of the pink-haired agent crammed into the back of a car, before finally settling on a smirk and murmuring with approval, "Well played." Welcome to the stage, Cara Puffy. Let's see how long you last. I just spit water everywhere. Maybe that's karma. Like the hit song by Taylor Swift. During the 3 hours Techno had spent in Agent Soot's trunk, he'd managed to catch up on some much-needed rest. He felt like he hadn't been able to catch a single break in the past 60 hours. Dang! Oh my gosh. And the bit of sleep he had gotten had been restless at best. But there was just something about Soot's presence that had somehow put him at ease. He wasn't sure whether it was because the agent had just saved his life, again, or because there was something that felt naturally secure and reliable about the brunette. But either way, Techno was finally able to close his eyes and drift off without feeling like he needed to keep a sharp awareness of his surroundings. It was a good sleep, too. Deep and full of colorful dreams. A curl of blonde hair. A father's embrace. Things he could only hope to wake up to. It was only when he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder that he finally blinked himself awake, sunlight hitting him in the eyes as he tried to squint up at the darkened silhouette above him. Thankfully, it moved to intercept the bright light, and Techno blinked a few more times as he finally made out the familiar gleam of silver spectacles, brown eyes bright with amusement as he looked down on Techno. "We made it, Sleeping Beauty," Soot announced, tapping Techno's shoulder more firmly as the agent finally managed to swim back into consciousness. "Your chief awaits." They're brothers! They are brothers. Oh my gosh! Then he watched as Soot dug into one of his pockets, pulling out a pocket knife and flicking it open before pressing the smooth edge against the skin of Techno's wrists. In one swift movement, he cut the zip ties that had been binding the other agent before quickly grabbing the remains and tossing them aside. Techno slowly sat up, massaging his wrists carefully, muscles aching tenderly as he cast Soot a long sideways glance. "Were those entirely necessary?" he asked gruffly. "You made me chase you halfway around across the world, so let's just call it even," Soot replied with a smug smile. Stuffing the Whoa. Why is my thing red? Is the stream still alive? Okay, we're good. That was weird. I love them so much. I'm unwell. Me too. Should have kept my fan on. It's kind of hot in here. All right. Let me read this part again. Okay. "You made me chase you halfway across the world, so let's just call it even," Soot replied with a smug smile, stuffing the pocket knife back into his brown leather jacket. Techno let out a small huff of laughter before scooting his way out of the trunk and onto the ground, only then glancing up at Puffy's apartment building. Yellow and white architecture, with a circular central window. She'd moved into it about a year ago, and although Techno had never been able to visit, Phil had told... Oh, Phil spelled with 2 L's. Sorry. Phil had told him to stop by every now and then and to check in on her when he could. He felt like he had so much catching up to do, and to be honest, he had no idea what to expect. Maybe she'd hug him when she saw him, or maybe she'd just scold him for being so reckless and out of touch. Either way, he felt something in his gut churning with anticipation, longing to set his eyes on a familiar face. Someone who'd understand the anxiety he was going through. Someone who cared about their tiny mismatched family. I can't say the word. Mismatched. There we go. Someone who cared about their tiny mismatched family as much as he did. Nailed it. Yes. "What are you thinking?" he heard Soot ask softly from behind him. I'm thinking we better get this done quick, Techno replied swiftly, before starting off toward the front door of the apartment building. They made their way into the entryway, then up the narrow flight of wooden stairs to the second floor. It emptied out into a small living room with bookshelves pressed up against the walls and a wooden desk sitting underneath the grand circular window you could see from outside. Everything was clean and tidy, just like Puffy was. Papers organized in stacks on the coffee table, a spotless hardwood floor, and books arranged in neat pressed rows. Green plants that grew out of tiny pots speckled the windowsills, and the atmosphere was homey and sentimental. Music was even drifting through the air, a French record that Techno vaguely recognized as something Tommy played once or twice during the time they'd spent together. But what really caught his eye was the empty chair at the center of the room, which looked recently patted down, and the portable oxygen tank that sat directly at its side, feeding an abandoned mask through a clear, thin tube. He stared at it blankly for a second as Soot sidled up beside him. Oh, what the? Sorry, I accidentally clicked something. That's embarrassing. Oh, okay. I'm back. No, you're right. Sidled? Was it the first one? Sidled? Like side? No, you're right. You got it right. The fact I can hear your tone through chat. Yes? Okay. Slay. Peace signs. Arigatou gozaimasu. Anyways, he stared at it blankly for a second as Soot sidled up beside him, scanning the room as well. Though his gaze was far more sweeping than Techno's was. Nice place, the agent murmured softly before adding, must have cost a fortune. Yeah, Techno replied absently, but his feet were already carrying him toward the left, where he could hear a soft clinking sound and the shuffle of slippers against tile. Lavau, you should hear her. I mean, I could always join VC, but obviously I cannot because I am reading. Sure enough, as he turned the corner of the apartment, he came upon a small kitchen area, where his eyes immediately landed on soft white curls bouncing gently around shoulders that were clad in flowy pink chiffon. Techno had to do a bit of a double take, not used to seeing the director without her tied-up hair or pressed suits. An island countertop separated their side of the room from hers, and Techno noticed a kettle sitting on the stove beside her elbow. I could read it out loud together and see nothing can go wrong. Bombastic side eye. Doubt. Press X for doubt. Doubt. That would be I do at the same time like chant. Please. No, you know what we need to do? We need to do not a bad lip reading. Oh, what are they called? Fandoms. Danny will tell you all about my ideas. Casting a appel. Spell. Can you spell? Now, this has just become a bullying session. I gotta read this. Oh my gosh. Okay, Techno noticed a kettle sitting on the stove beside her elbow. She barely cast a glance over her shoulder as they stood there, stirring diligently at 3 cups of tea before tossing over her shoulder. She barely cast a glance over her shoulder as they stood there, stirring diligently at 3 cups of tea before tossing over her shoulder. Took you long enough to get here. Was starting to think you wouldn't come at all. Techno stared at her back for a moment before finally whispering, sorry about that. But something about his voice suddenly sounded hollow and distant, like he couldn't quite grasp the idea of being here. It was like everything that had happened was suddenly raining down on him all at once. The homey and comforting environment, a steep contrast from what he'd been experiencing over the past few days, giving him too much time to actually think about what was happening. And it suddenly hit him that he was going to have to tell her about Phil and Tommy and everything else that had happened. Everything that was his fault. Puffy must have heard his voice. Or Puffy must have heard it in his voice, because suddenly she was turning to look at him, blue eyes dancing with concern. "Sorry?" she repeated, her voice a bit more rough than he remembered, a tired smile dancing across her lips. "That's new for you." She settled 2 cups of hot tea on the island counter that separated them, pushing them towards Soot and Techno respectively. My mom just texted me a picture of a tiger. This is epic. What are y'all talking about? I'll appel you off the face of the earth. Whoa. That took a turn. You can put appel on me anytime. Oh. No flirting during SBI Sunday. No. Lip bite. Do I not have an emote? Hold on. Where's my... Here it is. Lip bite. Sin City was a lady. Anyways, let's get back to the angst. New chat rules, no flirting. No flirting. Oh, I'm streaming. Oh man. Oh, she settled 2 cups of hot tea on the island counter that separated them, pushing them toward Soot and Techno, respectively. They smelled like honey and vanilla, and Techno watched out of the corner of his eye as Soot immediately pulled the mug toward him, breathing in the scent gently and letting out a tiny sigh of relief. Stress faded out of his posture as he took a sip, and Techno couldn't help but feel a flash of protectiveness. Oh my gosh. Protectiveness. Someone hold me back. I'm gonna fall down a flight of stairs. Techno couldn't help but feel a flash of protectiveness suddenly jolt through him, knowing how much they'd both been through together in the past few days. They were both strained and frayed, and Techno sincerely hoped that maybe having a safe house to settle in, even for a little while, was helping to lift some of the sudden crushing tension off of the brunette's shoulders. New chat rules. Homophobia is okay when Danny and Arby are being gross. /J. Homophobia is never okay. I'm going to lose my mind? You ain't ready, man. You ain't ready. Well, I think dragging you into all of this after retirement might constitute an apology, Techno finally replied, tearing his eyes carefully away from Soot before swinging his gaze back toward Puffy. Don't bother. I miss meddling, she offered softly, dragging her own mug to her lips and taking a gentle sip before adding, Miss talking to you too. Missed ordering me around, you mean? Techno snarked, to which Puffy's lips twitched into a smile, but he could tell there was something off about it. She had dark circles under her eyes, and despite how tidy her apartment was, she looked like she was barely keeping it together. She looked worn and weary, as if she'd been the only one running around the globe for the past 2 days and not Techno. And before he could stop himself, he heard himself asking, Are you okay? Puffy stiffened at that, confused eyes darting back up to Techno as she lowered her mug from her lips. She stared at him for a moment, eyes searching his face as the silence stretched on, but Techno's expression remained neutral and guarded. Soot's eyes danced between them, sensing something was off, before finally cutting through the silence by asking, Do you have a restroom I could borrow? Puffy lifted a finger without looking at him, gesturing back the way they came. Over there, on the right, she said, before the agent quickly voiced his thanks and ducked out of the room. The tense silence continued on for another long moment before Puffy finally gave a long sigh and lifted her tea back up to her lips. You've got something to tell me, Blade? She asked stiffly. What do you mean? She cast him a wary look. Something's up. Something's happened. I know you. You're terrible at hiding shit. If there's something more to all this, you better tell me now. before I have to suffer through another one of your crap apologies. Techno gave her a dry look. All I did was ask if you were okay, he countered. Yeah, and you're shit at that too. Puffy snapped hotly, practically slamming her mug down on the counter before giving another long sigh. Her shoulders slumped a little, her posture relaxing as she glanced back up at Techno. Oh, man. Dad came in to tell me goodnight. It's okay. We'll get done with this real quick and then I can finish my thing. A wink. I probably won't. All right. Let's see. You streaming, son? Are you streaming, son? Maybe. Where is I? Yeah, and you're shit at that too, Puffy snapped hotly, practically slamming her mug down on the counter before giving another long sigh. Her shoulders slumped a little, her posture relaxing as she glanced back up at Techno. Listen, whatever it is, you can tell me. I doubt it's going to surprise me. You're already way in over your head in all this, and if you're worried about my safety, don't be. I can handle myself. She let out a small sigh. Honestly, this is the least I can do. Came back. Found another thing that I guess works for everyone. Amazing, Manny. Amazing. Techno lifted his gaze back toward her, his teeth gritting together, his jaw flexing, but she just stared back at him knowingly. She knew him. Where am I getting these words? I have my glasses on, I swear. She knew him well enough to know how much he hated this. She knew that he hated asking for help, and more than that, she knew he was trying to keep her out of harm's way. Fuck. Why the fuck had he taken that chip from Puns in the first place? What had he been thinking? What was he even doing here? Retirement doesn't suit you, he said alone after a long moment, to which Puffy let out a breathy chuckle. Trust me, I know, she murmured, the smile never fading from her lips. Techno stared at her for a few seconds before finally tearing his eyes away to stare down into his tea. It was still warm, still steaming, and he could practically taste the honey on his tongue despite not having taken a single sip yet. Slowly, he took a deep breath, trying to steady the growing torrent of emotions in his chest before finally breathing. They've got Phil, and... He hesitated, breath hitching slightly, panic scratching at the back of his mind. And Tommy. Puffy's eyes widened slightly, but to her credit, she didn't seem all that surprised. Then after a moment she gave a small hum of acknowledgement, glancing over toward the window and taking a look outside. They're trying to get to you, she said softly, before turning her gaze back toward him, eyebrows furrowing fiercely. You can't let them. Techno grimaced, brown eyes rising to meet hers. He knew that. Of course he knew that, but it's eating you alive. Even I can see that, Puffy murmured, raising her mug to her lips again and tilting her head a little as she went to take another sip. And I think your partner in there can tell too. Techno cast a cautious glance over his shoulder, and even though Wilbur still hadn't returned from the bathroom, he still lowered his voice as he asked, "What makes you say that?" Is it okay if we say Wilbur's name here, Danny? I thought he didn't know his name yet. Shut up. I'm running to edit. Do you want to get the Phil with 2 L's while you're at it? Oh my gosh. It's okay, guys. This is like... This is why we do it. Type of the group chat, get their ass. No. Hello. Hi, Race Slayer. Hello. Cancel Danny. No. You goober? I'm a goofy goober. Rock. Oh my god. Why is there a picture of Captain Crunch in the VC chat? What is that? I'm not gonna say anything, but I feel like this is something. A reference to something. Bruh. Oh my gosh, same boat. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm taking my sweatshirt off, guys. It's too hot in here. Y'all get to see the mods entertain chat while I take this off. You forgot? You're funny. I understand now that you were talking about your grandpa and not mine. Oh my golly, that's so funny. That's so funny. Oh my gosh, crime. Crime. I have that same Nezuko figure. She's the cutest. I love her so much. You want to see her up close? Mwah. Okay. Back to the angst time, guys. We're not even halfway through this chapter. Okay. Techno cast a cautious glance over his shoulder, and even though Wilbur still hadn't returned from the bathroom, he still lowered his voice and asked, Arby, what the... Arby! Oh my gosh. My sibling just got a tattoo of our grandparents' anniversary. It's berry poggers. That's berry poggers! Arby, I'm literally... Oh my gosh. I'm crying. That's so funny. I'm sorry for your loss, but dang. Anywho. Techno cast a cautious glance over his shoulder, and even though Wilbur still hadn't returned from the bathroom, he still lowered his voice as he asked, "What makes you say that?" Puffy raised an eyebrow before darting her eyes off to the side and back at him again, as if the answer was right there on the wall beside them. Kid travels halfway across the world to save your ass, and you still think the only thing he's worried about is his career? She asks, before giving a small huff of disbelief. You need to get out more, Blade. Your people skills are seriously lacking. Sorry, the only downtime I have is usually spent in airplanes and hotel bathrooms icing my wounds, Techno rattled sardonically. Finally reaching out to take the tea he'd been offered, the smell too enticing to ignore any longer. You know, people hasn't ever really been my thing. I think I fixed them all wrong. Wait, what's the fic? Oh my gosh, Ray, this is the fic that Danny and I wrote. It's called The Pink Man. It's based off this action movie called The Gray Man. Really good. It's really good. We're reading chapter 5 right now. So, and if you want to see the other chapters, I have them on my VOD channel in the SBI Sunday playlist. So you just gotta find the ones with the pink man. So, yeah. Cool. Yeah, you know, people hasn't really ever really been my thing. Puffy let out a soft laugh as he finally... Yeah, Puffy let out a soft laugh as he finally took a sip from his cup. You can certainly say that again. Probably the reason you three got along so well. People was never Phil's thing either. Tommy's too. Although, I suppose he never really got the chance. Techno flinched at the phrasing, and Puffy immediately shook her head. Not what I meant, she amended quickly, lowering her gaze. You know that's not what I meant. It didn't burn any less, though. Memories of the snarky, defensive blonde pushing to the surface once more, but Techno quickly shoved them down again. He couldn't drown in all that right now. He could think about it later, when the kid was safe. when they were all safe. You never answered my question, he said finally, and when a confused look crossed Puffy's face, he clarified, "Are you okay?" Puffy lowered her mug onto the countertop and let out a long, stifled sigh. Sorry. Like about to choke on my own air. Puffy lowered her mug onto the countertop and let out a long, stifled sigh. Blade, and before you try to pull some bullshit over on me, Puff, I saw the fucking O2 mask. I'm not a fucking idiot, he said firmly. It didn't come out all that harsh. In fact, his tone was more concerned than anything else. But the words still must have bit in all the right places, because suddenly Puffy was clenching down on her jaw and shooting him a familiar glare. "You're really asking me right now? During all of this?" she accused. Complain about it all you like, but I'm not dropping this until you tell it to me straight," Techno retorted hotly. Puffy stared at him for a moment, as if trying to figure out a way to weasel herself out of this particular conversation. But as Techno continued to stare her down, a scowl tugging at his lips, she finally let out a sigh, lifting her mug from the countertop before traversing into a tiny table in the corner of the room, right underneath a rectangular window. Then, Techno watched as she lowered herself into a wooden chair and gestured to the center of the table, languidly. Languidly. That's a fancy word. Indicating a cluster of orange pill bottles. "That's all of them, if you're really that interested," she said somewhat boredly, taking another long sip of her tea. He cautiously walked over to her side, his own tea suddenly forgotten as he slipped into the chair across from her, picking up a pill bottle and reading from the label. It was all pretty heavy stuff, none of which implicated anything good. Oh my god. Mabu! Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for the raid, Who Is Mike? Welcome to the stream. Oh my goodness. Yo, Triple Strafe, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in, raiders. Oh my gosh, Mike, let me give you a freaking shout out. Shout out to the Who Is Mike. What's going on, man? How's your stream? Welcome in. What were y'all up to? Oh my goodness, welcome in, raiders. My name is Juliberry Live. I am a variety streamer here on twitch.tv, and I am currently reading some fanfiction to chat to go to sleep. But yeah, welcome in. Oh my goodness, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Are those your emotes? Oh, those are so cute. I love the little hat. That's awesome. But yes, Triple Strafe, thank you so much for the follow. Oh my goodness. But yes, I hope you had a great stream, Mike. If you need to go ahead and hit me with the lurk and do some aftercare stream self-care, go ahead and do so. But yeah, I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the stream. Get cozy, get some water, get a snack, get comfy, get a blanket. But yeah, enjoy. Yes, self-care. Yes, I love it. All right, we're gonna get back to reading. But again, thank you so much for the raid. I really appreciate it. Lies on the floor listening. Me too, Tavis. Oh my goodness. But yeah, feel free to join the Discord while you're here. I have a whole VODs channel of all my little reads that I do, so feel free to subscribe if you want. But yeah, we're gonna get back into it. Where did I leave off? He cautiously walked over to her side, his own tea suddenly forgotten as he slipped into the chair across from her, picking up a pill bottle and reading from the label. Thank you for the hydrate. It was all pretty heavy stuff, none of which implicated anything good. He lifted his gaze just long enough to give Puffy a glance, and she responded with a well-worn shrug, as if she'd been through this same conversation a million times before. "My lungs," she clarified, bringing her knuckles up to her chest and tapping at her sternum like it was hollow inside. "I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when." Just then, Techno heard footsteps as Wilbur re-entered the room, but he didn't even bother to cast the agent a glance as he continued on, eyes lingering on Puffy as he asked, Does Phil know?" She lifted an eyebrow, a playful smile suddenly dancing across her lips. "Phil always knows," she said, as if it was the most obvious fact in the world, and in most ways, it was. "He's the first person I told." Hi, Piso. How are you? Welcome in. Welcome, welcome. When? Techno asked, his tone darkening slightly. Her expression dulled a little, a knowing look filling her eyes. Blade, you can't possibly blame him for not when, he repeated, casting her a sharp look. She pursued her lips. Her pursed, excuse me, sorry. Oh my goodness, y'all all doing the followage right now? 11 months? Yes, period. 9 months, let's go. Tavis, you had your baby followage, let's go. 1 year! Right, you've been a trooper since the beginning. Let's go. Pursued her lips. Let's see. Oh my goodness. Hold on. Might want to slow down on the command use. That might be why it's 1 year, 10 months, and 25 days. Let's go, Dinar. Here, Manny, try it again. It might just be because you were doing it too fast. But y'all are so sweet. Thank you all so much. That literally means the world to me that you've been here for so long. That's crazy. Danny got me by a week. Dang! Oh, man. Yeah, try it again, Manny. I'm sorry it didn't work for you. Stream Elements just is going too fast. I did find you because of TikTok. Yes, I did. Oh my goodness. I need to post more on TikTok. I haven't done that in a hot minute. 7 months. Let's go, Manny. Let's go. Oh my goodness. It feels like a lifetime. Oh, man. All right. We got to get through this chapter, guys, or we're going to be here all night. All right. She pursed her lips, letting out another tiny sigh before finally saying, sometime last summer, so about 7 months. Techno shook his head, feeling slightly betrayed as he looked back down at the capsule of pills one more time before setting it back down on the table with a scoff. The pills rattling inside as they hit the hard surface. Phil should have said something. Why didn't he say something? Have a good night, Pepper. I hope you have a good rest of your night. Love you so much. Thanks for coming. You did say you were going to quit, Techno finally murmured. It was a life of few pleasures, Buffy replied, brushing off her previous proclamation as though she never meant it to begin with. I clung to the ones I had. Techno and Soot both seemed to recognize what she'd said simultaneously, but the brunette, who had come to a halt a few feet from them, his arms propped on the island counter, beat Techno to the punch, breaking the tension in the room as he gently asked, Was? 3 months, Puffy answered him without missing a beat. Optimistic. Techno's eyes widened slightly, the words 3 months hitting him like a punch in the gut. He felt something bend inside him, threatening to snap as he stared at the woman across from him. And suddenly he was trying to memorize all of her features. Fluffy white hair and kind eyes, her bright, naturally sunny smile, and her graceful disposition. He felt it tear at all the right parts of himself, the parts he kept hidden away most days, when he pulled out his gun and became more of a weapon than an actual person. He felt dreams he didn't realize he had suddenly begun to crumble. Dreams of someplace warm, someplace nice. Of Tommy sitting and telling them jokes as they all laughed together, all of them together, in the same place, at the same time. Just them and their little mismatched family, with all of the bullshit of the past tucked away behind them, and the future like an endless, peaceful night ahead. Someplace like home. 3 months wasn't nearly enough time. As if hearing his thoughts, Puffy suddenly turned her gaze back on Techno, expression darkening threateningly. If you utter anything remotely sympathetic, I will shoot you, she promised, though her tone played it off as a slight tease. Techno didn't say anything, allowing a half-amused smile to pull at his lips for a moment as the words 3 months still rang in his ears. Then he gently reached out, placing a hand on Puffy's knuckles instead, because if he couldn't speak, the least he could do was offer something. But Puffy just glared at him, lifting her hand up from underneath his before swatting his scarred knuckles away. He quickly retracted his hand as she leaned back in her seat and crossed her arms over her chest, silently fuming at the sympathy she never asked for, which he respected. She'd been dealing with this for a lot longer than he'd even known about it, and she'd probably made peace with it a long time ago. Still, that didn't mean it hurt less to lose her. Vilza, Tommy, Puffy. Who the fuck was next? Okay, he murmured finally, pulling his hand back across the table before pulling his hand back from a sorry. Okay, he murmured finally, pulling his hand back across the table before finally lifting it into the air, finally addressing the elephant in the room. Have you been well enough to check your mail lately? Puffy smiled, a spark in her eyes returning that Techno didn't even realize faded away during their conversation as she excitedly replied, I have. She rose from her chair, brushing past soot and toward the living room, chiffon flowing behind her. And Techno finally let himself cast a glance toward the other agent, only to see him staring back at him, eyebrows lifted slightly. Techno could almost hear the question in his head, right along with his shitty accent. You good? That's twins duo right there. That's twin telepathy right there if I ever saw it. He just rolled his eyes in response, getting up and moving to follow Puffy, with Soot trailing a few steps behind him. Puffy was already sitting in front of a small black laptop, jamming a familiar thumb drive into a port before clicking through several files and pulling up a new window. Techno came to a halt, hovering over her shoulder as he looked down at the screen. You get in? He asked, his voice rough, still trying to push away the previous conversation to the back of his mind. But Puffy's flashy smile quickly melted all that away. I always get in, she replied doubtlessly, turning to look back at the computer just as Soot slipped into a cushioned lounge chair that sat beside her. Looks like Syndicate Pun's got his hands on Schlatt's dirty laundry, she continued, pulling up videos and beginning to scroll through. Techno watched carefully, the footage showing proof of backroom business. Yo, I can hear everything with these new but that is crisp. That is crisp. Is that supposed to be proof, Dan? But yeah. Danny is so good to me, guys. Danny is so good. Danny is so good to us. No one can do it like him, okay? No one. The footage showing proof of backroom... Yo, Nix, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Yo, I'm gonna go shower, but you're still alive by the time I'll come again. Have a good rest of your stay. Thank you so much, Ray. But welcome in, Nick. How are you doing? Welcome to the stream. I hope you're having a good day, night, evening, whatever your time zone may be. Proof of backroom business, secret deals, and even a few assassinations done by Dream himself. Techno felt himself tense at the footage, leaning forward to get a closer look as a pent-up feeling of rage pressed against the back of his eyes. Assassination, torture, bombings, Puffy rattled off, still clicking through the murderous slideshow, all unsanctioned with no regard for collateral damage. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes landing on Techno. This is why Schlatt pushed me and Watson out. This is why you are on a ledge, Blade. He's using the agency as his own personal hit squad. Techno felt his heart begin to pound against his chest. He really wanted to punch something, or shoot something, or just scream, his anger boiling over as he grit his teeth. All of this bureaucratic bullshit, it was never anything simple. God, he just wanted his kid back, for fuck's sake. What's he getting all out of this? Soot suddenly asked, his eyes scanning over the screen. His voice suddenly sounded very small, and Techno found his gaze swinging towards the brunette just to check. He was wide-eyed, staring at the screen like he couldn't quite comprehend exactly what it was he was seeing. And Techno felt himself take an instinctive step closer to him. He was in this mess too now. His faith in his job he put so much blood, sweat, and tears in suddenly ripped out from underneath him, and Techno couldn't help but feel like reaching out a hand to steady him. but he didn't. Not yet, anyway. Yet. My goodness, I'm going to aggressively inhale. This is shadow government stuff, Puffy replied with a gentle shake of her white curls, which, bluntly, is above Schlatt's pay grade. Soot frowned. Guardian angel? He asked, a simple phrase that meant someone from on high within their ranks was lending their bastard of a boss a helping hand. I'm just gonna... Only Danny and I know the secrets. Only Danny and I know. Laughs evilly. Techno felt a snarl pull at his lips, and he quickly turned away, eyes meeting the display monitor that Puffy had hooked her laptop up to, scanning the screen as it scrolled through undocumented files they shouldn't have access to. At least one, she replied easily, pushing him up the ladder, covering his tracks. Somebody very powerful is pulling the strings. Techno suddenly heard the push of footsteps just as Soot came to a halt beside him, arms folded protectively over his chest as he cast Techno a sideways glance, before also turning to look at the screen in front of them. How was Syndicate Puns involved? Blackmail, Puffy responded, leaning back into her chair. Puns was always a hustler. Looks like he found out about Schlatt, got a hold of some evidence, tried selling it to the highest bidder. Schlatt got wind of it and used Blade to take him out. Big mistake. Techno turned over his shoulder, glancing back at his old director, who was shooting him a knowing smile, before quickly turning back toward her computer and removing the drive from its compartment. Then she quickly placed it back inside the gold medallion, fitting the cover into place just as Soot asked, "There's no way we can copy the file?" "It's a dead disk," Puffy replied with a small shake of her white curls. "You copy it, you encrypt the encryption." "Then we have to leak it to the press," Soot said insistently. "Yeah, I can read," insistently, just as Puffy raised the medallion toward Techno. She lifted an expectant eyebrow, waiting for him to take it, and he let out a short huff of reluctance, letting her drop it into his open palm. It wasn't like he had much of a choice to begin with. Yeah, I can read. Look at me go. Look at me go. Look at me go. I can read. No one can do it like me. Yo, new introduction. Welcome, Nick. We're happy to have you here. One! Oh my gosh. When are we gonna have Sonic Saturday where we read Sonic and Shadow fanfiction, huh? Oh man. Yippee. Yippee. Bum, 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 bum. Where am I at? It wasn't like he had much of a choice to begin with, but just having the information on him again would no doubt bring him all sorts of bad luck in the future. And if he wasn't being tailed before, no doubt everyone on Schlatt's team, including the company, would be training a gun on his back now. Safe to say, the medallion felt a little heavy in his hand. Techno could still feel Soot's eager eyes on him, silently waiting. Techno could still feel Soot's... I know what's coming, and I'm like getting so excited just to read it out loud. Techno could still feel Soot's eager eyes on him, silently waiting for his agreement. But Techno was already turning away from him, not bothering to look back as he headed toward the kitchen and muttered, "Just wait until I find Phil and the kid, would you?" There was a tiny pause, before he heard Soot's suddenly concerned voice trail after him. "There's a kid?" I'm gonna have a heart attack and die in a video game. Techno paused, feet settling heavily on the hardwood floor as he let out a tiny breath. Puffy's words swimming back to him. Excuse me. kid travels halfway around the world to save your ass, and you still think the only thing he's worried about is his career? Right. They're in this together now. Oh my gosh. Denny, you are just the best. Right. They're in this together now, whether the two of them like it or not. Soot saved his life twice now, and most likely going on a third, so there shouldn't be anything left that Techno couldn't trust him with. He knew the agent's intentions were pure, and that he clearly sought justice for the backhanded way Schlatt had treated him. But the stuff was on his shoulders, but the stuff wasn't on his shoulders, it was on Techno's. And since he was going to make it right, there was really no reason left to lie. I love that we read this under the last typos. It happens. It happens, and that's the fun thing about doing this. We just get to go through it again together. There was really no reason left to lie. Watson's nephew, he finally murmured, slinging the medallion around his neck before turning back to give Soot a sharp glance. But look, you've done more than enough. Just find cover. Techno took a step towards him, giving him a tight nod. This is on me. The agent stared back at him, conflict suddenly settling into his gaze, his eyes wide with something Techno couldn't quite place. It looked like he wanted to argue with him, but he was holding back for some reason, and before he could even bother to try and find the words, Puffy was stepping up to Techno and palming something in her hand. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you insist on a rescue mission... She raised up what she was holding, offering Techno a key with a tiny white paper attached to its ring. My bug-out car. It's a bulletproof loaded trunk, stashed in the garage in the city center. Address is on the tag. We should have done every time there's a typo, we get a nickel. Because every time we touch, I get this feeling, and every time we kiss, I swear I can fly. Can't you feel my heartbeat? So I can't let you go. Want you in my life. Addresses on the tag. She was pushing it into his hand before he could even bother to take or decline the offer, her cool fingers curling around his as she did. Techno felt his own grip tighten around her, suddenly not wanting to let go, not wanting to let another person he cared about slip through his grasp before her gaze softened on him. That you'd get alcohol. No drinking on this stream. No drinking on this stream. Ooh. We take shots of apple juice here. And water. So... not wanting to let another person he cared about slip through his grasp before her gaze softened on it. Slipping through my fingers all the time. I try to capture every minute. Oh my gosh, I still have to add all those songs to the playlist. Guys, we have a playlist for this fic, by the way. You should listen to it. It's called The Pink Man. It's on Spotify. You literally just have to look it up. She pulled at his arm a little, taking a... I don't know why. I was about to say teeny, even though it says tiny. I'm so stupid. She pulled at his arms a little, taking a tiny step closer as a slight smile tugged at her lips, before she finally... Oh my god, it's Cat Ocean! Everyone freak out! Hi, Cat. Teeny, taking a teeny step closer. Cat! Cat! We missed you! Oh my goodness. Appy juice. We love appy juice in this house. Oh my gosh, Denny is having a cat fangirl moment. Cat, every time you freaking tease at goodasgold on twitter.com, I freak out. /pause. I'm so excited for this fic, bro. Julie, do you have a playlist of all the Pinkman readings, or is this the first one? I have a playlist. They're not in any specific order because they're all clumped with my VODs. So just go to the VODs channel, check the playlist SBI Sunday. You can look through all the videos. I have the fics that I read listed in the bio of the videos. But I do read Pinkman in order. I started at chapter 1 and now we're on chapter 5. You need to catch up. But yeah, so I give you the VODs channel. Good luck. You can listen to all the stuff. I know some people put timestamps in the comments, but not all of them. So, have fun. You may just have to listen to some stuff that you've never heard before or read before, you know? Bing bong. Whippin' nay nay. We're gonna read the rest of this fic because it's about to get sad. She pulled at his arm a little, taking a tiny step closer as a slight smile tugged at her lips, before she finally whispered, "Hey, inmate. Her blah 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 blah." That sounded ominous. Good. "Hey, inmate." His eyes flickered up to hers, trying very hard to mask his emotions, but he could feel his mask slowly begin to crumble as she finished. "Thanks for proving us right." That was the closest thing to an "I'm proud of you" Techno knew he was ever going to get. But it didn't touch him any less, yanking painfully at his heartstrings even as he muttered, "I thought we weren't getting sentimental." "We're not," Puffy shot back flatly, though her smile said otherwise. Puffy wanted to smile back at her, wanted to lean in and give her a hug, wanted to tell her he'd come back and visit before her 3 months were up. Anything just to see her again after this moment. But before he could, his gaze was catching on something out the window, and he moved just in time to hear the first gunshot go off and the glass shatter. He immediately went for Puffy, the car key falling to the floor as he tackled her to the ground, bullets ricocheting around the room and puncturing holes in the walls, causing bits of debris and dust to fly everywhere. It was nonstop, clearly the work of some automatic weaponry, and Techno quickly crawled to cover with Puffy tucked underneath his shoulder as the gunfire continued to rain down around them. He cast a quick glance over his shoulder, watching as soot rolled across the carpet and found cover of his own, his back pressing up against the corner of a wall, and his once inexplicable features now clouding over with a sharp tension. Luckily, he seemed unharmed, and Techno quickly turned back to Puffy to see if she was all right too. He could immediately tell that she was, her strangely relaxed posture and the annoyed expression on her face an instant giveaway, clearly irritated as she watched bullets carve up her drywall. Her drywall. The bullets carve up her drywall. Oh. What is drywall? That's I've had nothing but drywall for the past 3 days. That's from a Sonic fan dub. The president says that. And so it begins. Oh my gosh. The relentless bombardment lasted about 20 seconds, the three of them hiding out in their respective places of cover as dust filled the air, before the gunfire finally came to an abrupt stop. And Techno found himself jerking his head back around the corner to glance at Soot once more. The agent was already looking back at him this time, and Techno watched as he flexed his eyebrows in exasperation before holding up the key to Puffy's loaded car. Nothing if not capable, this kid. Techno immediately gestured toward the staircase, signaling for Soot to leave as he whispered, "Go." But Soot hesitated, that conflict returning to his gaze once more, his posture tensing slightly as he refused to move from the wall he was pushed up against. Ugh, this fucking kid. He was too selfless for his own good. Techno was about to signal again, only more urgently and commanding this time, when suddenly there came the sharp sound of something hitting the floor, and his eyes snapped toward the familiar sound just in time to see a hand grenade land about 2 feet from Soot. Immediately, the agent was on his feet, a blur of brown fabric, before he was out of Techno's sight, and Techno had just enough time to turn and throw an arm around Puffy, burying them both into the nearest wall as the grenade exploded, hitting them with a wall of sound and heat. Then before it barely even settled, Puffy was pulling his arm from her shoulders, whispering as she stood, "Door, in the kitchen, under the mat." She trailed Techno as they made their way toward it, coughing a little as they moved through the dust and around the table they'd just been sipping tea at not 10 minutes before. Then Techno bent down to move the mat, grabbing onto the hidden latch and pulling open the trapdoor with ease and revealing a set of narrow wooden stairs. "Okay," he said, offering Puffy his hand to help down. "Get in." But Puffy shook her head, waving a hand around through the residual smoke with a scowl and blinking her eyes rapidly as she ordered, "Just lead. The light's on the left and I can't see." Techno glanced back down the staircase, spotting the switch on the left and immediately making his way down the passage to flick on the lights. But as soon as his head was underneath the floorboards, the door suddenly slammed down behind him. His head immediately whipped around, his stomach dropping into his feet as he realized what was happening before hearing a muffled, "Go!" No. Fuck that. Fuck this. He wasn't losing anyone else today. He can't. He won't. Techno lifted a hand, pushing at the door, but when he was only met with resistance, he felt his blood slowly start to boil, knowing she'd locked it from the outside. Why was she doing this? Why would she do this? 3 months. Optimistic. "Don't do this, Puffy," Techno snapped, staring at the plank of wood and trying to bore his gaze into Puffy, who was no doubt still on the other side, before pounding his fist into the boards, his voice wavering slightly as he desperately shouted, "Open the door!" There was nothing, no response, and Techno immediately grit his teeth, trying to steady his voice into something more soothing and reasonable as he firmly repeated, "Open the door!" "Quiet!" came Puffy's soft voice from the other side, and Techno could swear it almost sounded like a goodbye. Fuck that. If she wasn't going to come down, then he'd just have to find a way back up. He slammed his palm on the trapdoor in frustration one last time before finally turning and bolting down the narrow set of wooden stairs, practically tripping his way down as he took the flight several steps at a time. But even as he finally spotted the hidden door to the street, light leaking through its corners, he couldn't help but feel something dark and cold settle into the pit of his stomach, knowing that every moment he spent trying to cling to his self-proclaimed family would only ever put them in more danger, and every second of time he spent with them would never really be enough. Okay. Oh, cat. You're in for a doozy. You are in for a doozy! Oh, man. I'm gonna try and pronounce all these words correctly now. Alright. Back in his operations room in Zabrak Castle. Am I pronouncing that even right? Zaburka. Zaburka. Zaburka Castle. Zebra Castle. I'm gonna call it Zebra Castle. It's probably not correct at all. I wonder if it'll do like a... translate, Google search, pain, hello, my heart. Hey man, what can I say? Danny knows what she's doing. Oh. This whole fic is pain. It is pain. Dream watched the collection of monitors on the wall with undivided attention, scanning each screen as it played live body cam footage from his team in Prague. Their guns raised as they obliterated Kara Puffy's apartment suite with a well-placed barrage of bullets. It was a good entrance, he thought, and definitely flashy enough to garner some attention, if not kill her. And sure, it was a little messy, but in the end, it was all good. It was all in good fun. This man is psychotic. Zebra Castle. Zebra Castle! Holy shit, George muttered from the front of the room, his arms crossed over his chest as he cast a dumbfounded glance back at Dream. Can't you do anything discreetly? I can kill you, Dream replied sweetly. They're such assholes. I hate them. Though there was a deadly lit to his tone, and George immediately glowered and faced back toward the monitors, skin flickering with blue light. The team had made their way over to the front door, gun barrels still swinging as they kicked down Puffy's door and began climbing their way up the stairs. Changing the song, it's kind of too happy for this. Oh yeah, Abzu. Perfect. The team had made their way over to the front door, gun barrels still swinging as they kicked down Puffy's door and began climbing their way up the stairs. Then, after a few turns, they were in the apartment, debris and dust floating through the camera lenses, the carnage on full display as the live feed captured everything for Dream to see. They swept through the wreckage, flashlights glancing off battered furniture and wrecked bookshelves, when suddenly an unmistakable voice came filtering through the speakers. "In here." Of course. He should have known it wouldn't be so easy to kill her. After an annoying moment of unacknowledgement with his team completing their sweep, she finally repeated with irritation and impatience. "In here." They followed the voice, rounding the corner and into the kitchen. Soldiers raising their guns to a hazy figure who was casually sitting at a small round dining table, as if the apartment around hadn't just been torn to shreds by gunfire. "Hands up!" One of the mercenaries. I love how he instinctively hold up a finger gun. This is just getting into it, guys. "Hands up!" One of the mercenaries shouted as the small group filled the room, flashlights pointed at the figure, casting her already pale features in a ghostly white glow. Cara Puffy lounged back in her wooden chair, her expression the picture of elegance, an unlit cigarette in hand, and the long curtain of her robe shimmering off the lens of the camera Dream was seeing her through. Her long white hair cascaded down her shoulders in waves, and despite the harsh bite of spite and hatred he felt for her, there was something locked way deep inside him that still remembered his early days at the agency, when he was still just a rookie, and she was still just a case manager. Something about leveling files into his hands and asking after him during missions. Something about her soft smile and gentle demeanor. Something about dropping off coffee on her desk in the morning. Something about 2 creams and 4 sugars. Something about still remembering how she liked it. Something about camaraderie, friendship. Don't trip up, little duckling. It took him only a split second to realize she was staring at him, right through the camera lens of his mercenary, for him to understand that she was still able to pick him apart with those soft blue eyes. Then, like someone had ripped him awake from a daydream, he heard one of the mercenaries demand, "Where is he?" Puffy glared at the man who'd asked the question, leaning forward to grab her silver lighter from off the table, annoyance leaching into her tone, as if she'd known the man had interrupted their moment of brief eye contact through the wall of monitors. "Where is who?" she replied boredly, placing her cigarette against her lips. Even now, pinned down by guns, lost in the haze and ruin of her own home, she commanded authority. No, Dream thought bitterly. She demanded it. "Do not play with me," the mercenary threatened back, though it sounded feeble and lost in the muffle of his mask, as if anything that came from his lips would fall deaf and useless on the woman who sat before him. Dream felt unsettled. Something wasn't right. This wasn't going the way he expected. This wasn't at all what he imagined. He imagined Blade jumping out from around the corner and putting up a good fight. He'd expected Puffy with 2 pistols and gritted teeth, ducking corners and putting as many bullets as she could manage through his men. He'd expected surrender, expected a glower of disdain as she handed over the medallion, and the sweet taste of victory as he watched her watch Blade bleed out on the hardwood floor. But this wasn't that. This wasn't part of the plan. Dream immediately stepped toward the table in front of the monitor display, trying to get a better look through the grainy body cam footage, setting his hands down on the table, eyeing Puffy through the monitor. "The hell is she doing?" he muttered. Beside him, on the other side of the table, George looked just as confused, eyes not leaving the screens in front of him as he raised a hand in the air that said, "How the fuck should I know?" "Oh, Duckling, Puffy drawled, her voice sending a cold shiver down Dream's spine, that familiar nickname ringing in her ears, nickname ringing in his ears, taunting him, burning him. Before she smiled that familiar gentle smile and said, "Whatever they are paying you, it is not enough." Dream watched as one of the body cams on his mercenaries turned toward the small gas stove top in the corner with the knob cranked to full blast before he finally heard a, "Oh shit!" Then, in one violent sweep, Puffy flicked the lighter, and there was a single flash of bright white light before every single screen went black. "Jesus," George muttered, his voice full of shock and disbelief. Dream stared at the monitors for a second, each one now displaying an immutable red offline, and felt his head spin a little before he took a stifling breath and murmured, "Well, that was unexpected." "Did we just kill Cow Puffy?" George asked, his voice full of something like panic as his eyes raised up toward the empty screens before suddenly whirling on Dream. Dream didn't say anything, since the answer should have been clear, and he hoped his eye roll conveyed as much. He preferred the snarky attitude and bitchy comebacks from George far more than the whiny stupidity, but his mild annoyance slipped back into focus as the gears suddenly began to churn in his head. Blade had been there, right under his nose, which meant that the explosion hadn't been for nothing. Puffy's last breath had been to buy the traitor time. "Where are we?" he finally demanded, fists still pressed into the hardwood table, his eyes still roaming across empty screens. "We have Alpha and Bravo teams circling," one of the tech operators said from his place behind a monitor. "Delta's en route. Cameras aren't live yet." Dream straightened, turning away and leveling a glare toward the nearest open window. "Send everyone," he snapped. "Get him in there. Every team. Light it up." Then he smirked, a maniacal smile crawling at his lips as he added, "They want the money I promised? And somebody better bring me the pig's head." I'm back. What happened? Oh, Manny. Explosions. You know L'Manberg that blew up? Imagine that happening to a person. And several bad guys. How we doing, chat? How we doing? That was pretty epic, huh? That was pretty cool. Shazam. Alright. Puffy fucking died. A lot, apparently, yeah. Yep. She went out saving her buddy. Alright, now we're about to get real angsty here. Techno tumbled out of the small crawl space in the side of Puffy's apartment building before scrambling to his feet, tripping down the cobblestone before turning a sharp left back toward the white double doors he and Soot had come in through, hearing his own voice mutter a grating, "No, no, 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 no," as he sprinted faster. He could already hear the sirens, see police cars pulling up the street, but he ignored them for a moment, something far more important waiting for him inside. Then he was right there, right at the entrance, ready to fly back up the stairs and kick the shit out of Dream's men and save her, when suddenly there was an ear-deafening roar from above him, accompanied by the unmistakable shatter of glass, and the door in front of him exploded. He was immediately shot backward, thrown across stone, loose gravel nicking at his skin and scratching across his palms as his body slammed several times against the pavement before he finally rolled to a halt. For a moment, everything rang in his ears, his head spinning, his face in the dirt, before he gathered up enough strength to push himself to his elbows and let out a shaky breath. What the fuck was that? He could hear shouting in Czech, turning his head a little toward the sound to see an officer staring back at him, the door to his police car still open, his handgun trained on Techno like he was a criminal. Then again, wasn't he? He quickly pushed himself to his feet. Well, as quickly as he could, before slowly raising his hands and beginning to walk forward, and suddenly remembering a strange feeling of déjà vu. and suddenly a strange feeling of deja vu fell over him. Because he remembered this. Remembered being arrested, being cuffed, being dragged away. All because he tried to help. All because he tried to protect someone he loved. He turned, slow, hands still raised, but mind still half somewhere else, drifting off into memories he's sworn he'd forgotten. When suddenly he looked up and saw it. Puffy's apartment. It was all black smoke and red fire, licking at the frames of white windowsills and pouring into the air, barely recognizable compared to the building he'd walked into just an hour before. It was bitter and final, and the heat smothered Techno even though he couldn't feel it, even though he was standing far away. It was suffocating him, like hands around his neck, like a sob that wouldn't release, like love spent too little and far too late. I'm shaking your head, Dinar. I'm shaking your head right now. And the last pieces of that beautiful daydream Techno had thought up during all his lonely missions and hours of isolation, the one where they're all together, somewhere, smiling and laughing and at peace, that single thought of home suddenly shriveled up and died, buried underneath the rubble, along with the one of the only people he had ever called friend. And he never even got to say goodbye. We're so evil, guys. Tears fill my eyes. Good, I'm gonna drink them right now. Ah, tasty. What the frick back patio wagon angst? Bro, what can we say? Techno lowered his gaze to the ground, the policemen that surrounded him still shouting orders, their guns still raised toward his head. But he barely even heard them. Everything was a blur compared to the pounding of blood in his ears, his thoughts racing over his grief as he felt the last thing Puffy had ever given him weigh heavily around his neck. The golden medallion sitting cold and solid against his heart. He dragged her into this mess, and she let herself be dragged. All his fault. All over again. How long would it take for him to learn? How long until he realized that he was a poison that never failed to infect? How long until Phil and Tommy were next? He shook his head, anger settling low and hot inside him. It couldn't go this way. He couldn't give up. Not yet. Not when Puffy had just sacrificed herself to buy him a way out. Not when her last act in this life was meant to save him. Not when there was still someone he needed to save. Tommy. It's Tommy. He's talking about Tommy. Oh my god! That was when he felt the air shift behind him, catching the glimpse of a police car beginning to approach. And before he could bother to second-guess himself, he flew into action, catching the barrel of the man's raised gun before lashing out a fist and landing a blow directly into his temple. The man stumbled backward, reeling just as another officer went to attack him from behind, swinging his baton down on Techno's head, but Techno caught his wrist before the strike could land, bringing up his knee straight into the man's ribs as he ripped the stick from his grasp and proceeded to strike him across the face. The third police officer had his gun trained on him, still shouting at him to stand down, but Techno was already turning back to the first man he punched, dodging a swing from him before ducking under his shoulder and wrapping an arm around his neck, facing the third officer as he used the policeman as a body shield. Part of him wished it didn't have to be like this. They were only doing their jobs. But he didn't have time for the authorities right now. He needed to get the hell out of here right now. I'm like doing the moves with him. I'm like, I am Technoblade. For the Solar Empire. You know? That was a reference. Oh my goodness. Oh man. So he did the most efficient thing, slamming the man in his grasp down on the hood of the nearest police car and bringing the baton down on the back of his head, effectively knocking him out before ducking a few stray shots as the third officer opened fire on him. Then, just like that, he was vaulting over a nearby railing, landing carefully on his feet before taking off running. Unfortunately, as fast as he was, it wasn't like he could outpace a police car. He was only a clear... I love that you're suddenly acting out. I really am. I'm like... Oh man, it gets me in the mood. Because this is the action scene. And so to read action, I gotta do the action or else I'm just like this. I am dead reading. I need to feel the feels. Ugh. Excuse me. He was only clear for a block or two before he heard sirens begin coming up from behind him, the third officer having taken pursuit. Oh, if you're watching on your phone, that might be the mobile delay, but if you're watching on PC, then delay is delay, my dude. You're fine. He was only clear for a block or two before he heard sirens begin coming up behind him, the third officer having taken pursuit. He tried ducking between buildings and street vendors, underneath archways and old brick buildings, but the car only followed him, hot on his tail as it chased him right into an intersection. Thankfully, he saw a small break in traffic and darted out before the cars could hit him, passing a tram before suddenly... Wow! Yeah, I just had to do that, sorry. Something rammed into... Ow, I hit the mic. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to abuse you. Something rammed into his side, hard, and Techno felt glass shatter underneath him as he was knocked off his feet for the second time that day, once again tossed across the stone of the road and coming to a halt, face down. Only this time, he didn't have to wonder what it was that had thrown him to the ground, because believe it or not, this wasn't the first time he'd been hit by a fucking car. Belgium, 3 years ago. And as he let out a low groan, his ears ringing, his vision filling with black dots, he hated to admit it sucked even more the second time around. I looked at the cast for the Gray Man. This stacked is the cast is stacked. Holy moly, indeed. Yeah, I'm on phone. Yeah, phones usually have a bigger chat delay than if you were watching on like a computer. I don't know why. That's kind of cringe on Twitch's end, but it is what it is. Somewhere in his foggy state of mind, Techno could grasp the sense that he probably had a concussion, but as he tried his best to gather his bearings, he could only make out bits and pieces through his foggy state of mind. Cool metal suddenly clicking around his wrist, someone dragging him dizzily to his feet, leading him out of the road, thick blurs of color, voices. Yo, Dr. Breath King, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the stream. I hope you have a lovely day, night, evening, whatever your time zone may be. I'm like a rap god when I do that. You know. Anyways, welcome to the stream. We're reading fanfiction. Voices and noises overlapping and amplified in his ears, everything echoing all around him. Then he felt himself being pushed up a set of stone stairs and led to a bench, before finally getting shoved down into it. Someone playing with the metal around his wrist again as his head kept spinning. It all happened way too fast, but also suspiciously slow, and Techno had little time to catch up before he saw black uniforms shifting in front of him, talking in low voices with each other and casting cautious glances back at him. He saw flashing blue lights and heard the beating of empty buckets as street performers pounded out a rhythm on their drums. Then he saw his wrist with a handcuff locked around it, and everything suddenly slammed back into him as reality took hold. Yo, Android, welcome. First time chatter. Hi, how you doing? Fuck. Still a bit disoriented, Techno's first instinct was to try and pull his left hand loose from where it was cuffed to a metal pole, one that curved over the back of the bench he'd been forced to sit down in. But almost immediately, a police officer jumped forward and said in very clear English, "Hey, stop it!" grabbing his wrist and flinging his free hand away from the cuffs before ordering, "Don't move, okay? Stay still." Techno listened to him, holding up his free hand in surrender before hearing the roar of sirens again, careening around the corner, and the squawk of brakes as it screeched to a halt. He watched closely as more police piled out of the car, carefully reorienting himself as he watched the officers begin to push people back, trying to herd them toward the edge of the square, supposedly to keep them as far away from the situation as possible. but it was impossible not to notice the concerned looks on the civilians' faces, or the fear in their eyes as the police shoved them away, with heavy weaponry splayed out in their arms, and Techno felt something heavy begin to fill the air, a tension that he knew shouldn't be ignored. He's got the force, man. He knows what's up. There was no doubt in his mind that Dream had more men on the way, more mercenaries coming to kill him and take the medallion from around his neck. And if Techno had learned one thing about Dream, it was that he wouldn't care about anyone who might get in the way. He scanned the area, already feeling anxiety beginning to push at him, the bad feeling only growing in the pit of his stomach, when his eyes suddenly caught on a truck with tinted windows, pulling up to the side of the street, before coming to a halt not 50 yards away from where he was seated. "You should clear the square," Techno said immediately, head swinging back around to look at the English-speaking officer. "Shut up," another officer responded, this one barking into a walkie-talkie in Czech. Techno could only make out bits and pieces, Czech being one of the languages he never quite got the hang of, but either way, it was clear that these guys had no idea what they were getting themselves into. And they were totally unprepared for whatever it was Dream might have up his sleeve. Techno didn't really want to wait to find out what that was. His eyes trailed back over to the truck, just in time to see a tram pull around it, blocking its view of him momentarily, before his head whipped back toward the officer and he repeated more urgently this time, "You should clear the square." "I told you to shut up," the officer yelled, shoving a finger in Techno's face, but before the words could even finish leaving his lips, Techno reached out, grabbed his wrist, dragging the man forward just enough to grab hold of his gun. Then, before any of the officers could even bother to react, he pointed the weapon straight into the air and let off 2 rounds of fire. Pew, pew. That's the sound guns make. Pew, pew. That is not the sound guns make. But you know what? It's late, and I'm quirky, and I want to do sound effects. I need chapstick. Remember, anyone new here who doesn't know what's going on, I am reading a fan fiction that me and my friend have written. And if you want to read it too, here's the link. I should... Oh my gosh, wait. Pin message. Read along. This is... Why didn't I do this before? I love Twitch. Yes! I'm so smart. There we go. Unpin after manually end the stream. Okay. Slay! Filza? Yep. I love Filza Minecraft. He is in this story. He is so cool. Immediately, people screamed in alarm. The crowd of civilians gathered in the square, immediately scattering, running away from the noise as 3 more officers grabbed Techno's arm, trying to pin him down and keep him from shooting anyone. Not that there was any chance of that. Excuse me. Someone grabbed hold of the gun in his grasp, trying to rip it from his hold, but Techno already knew he was going to need it for what came next. And sure enough, just as the tram... You're doing great. Thank you, thank you. I'm doing great, guys. Someone grabbed a hold of the gun in his grasp, trying to rip it from his hold, but Techno knew he was going to need it for what came next. And sure enough, just as the tram pulled around the bend of the truck, 4 armed men were climbing out of the side of the vehicle, guns raised and bulletproof shields providing them with cover. And of course, they were gunning for Techno. They immediately let their bullets run loose, more screaming ringing out as the square turned into a battlefield, people ducking for cover. Techno tried his best to shake the police officers off of him, but in doing so, let go of the pistol he'd been holding, watching it fall to the ground by his feet as the officers continued to wrestle with him. Trouble was, he was still cuffed to the bench, so he had 1 arm and limited mobility, as he watched bullets begin to cut through the people that surrounded him one by one, the officers falling to the ground. He was finally able to shake himself free, vaulting over the back of the limestone bench and pressing his body against it, hearing bullets ricochet against the front, where he'd just been seated. His hand was still pinned awkwardly above his head, however, still cuffed to the metal pole, and he quickly glanced around the corner to see if there was anything to set him free with, only to watch as a mercenary filled an incoming police car with holes, their gun popping off violently as the car went whizzing by and crashed headfirst into a nearby stone wall. The sound was sickening, and Techno had to close his eyes for a moment, shaking his head as he took a breath to steady himself. The longer he stayed here, the more people would get hurt, and that wasn't what he wanted. This was the last thing he wanted. He just wanted to get his kid back. You Mrs. Tommy. Techno's eyes flew open when he suddenly heard more tires screeching into the square. He slid his wrist along the top of the bench to get a better look at who it could be. Staying low as he shifted against the concrete ground, there were actually several more vehicles pulling up. A blue van bringing out more armed men, along with multiple SWAT cars, no doubt ordered in as backup to help shut down all the conflict. Unfortunately, Techno knew it probably wouldn't be enough, and if he wasn't able to find an opening to get the hell out of here soon, he'd eventually wind up dead. He ducked his head under the bench, still trying to set himself free from the handcuffs, when he finally spotted the gun that he'd taken earlier, resting on the ground a few feet in front of where he'd previously seated. Tripping over my words, my bad. It was just close enough that he could reach through and grab it. Thank you. If you end up falling asleep, like, no worries. The VOD will be here tomorrow when you wake up. It was just close enough that he could reach through and grab it. But as he maneuvered himself closer to the weapon, stretching out a hand to try, a stray gunfire suddenly buried itself in the ground near his fingertips. Instinctively, as a hot spray of rock nicked across Techno's knuckles, he jerked his hand back, letting out a growl of frustration. Quickly, opting to use his foot instead, he kicked out a leg before hooking the pistol over the top of his laces and drawing the gun underneath the bench, out of the mercenary's line of fire. Finally, Techno managed to grab the gun, just in time to see a mercenary gun down a police officer directly to his left, his eyes already traveling to Techno's gaze. Techno quickly leveled the pistol at him in return, letting a shot ring out just as the man ducked for cover underneath the wall. A stone wall. Brain going too fast, I'm skipping words. He kept the barrel trained on the same area, waiting patiently for him to pop out again, before finally seeing a shift of dark fabric at the edge of the wall. He let 3 more shots ring out, watching the man fall unceremoniously to the ground, before immediately flicking his wrist to the chain of the cuffs and pull the trigger, only to hear an empty click. My thumb popped when I did that, so that was really funny. I hope the mic picked that up. If not, believe me, my thumb popped when I did that. Techno stared at the handcuffs for a moment, still unbroken, before finally closing his eyes and lowering his head. Fuck, he thought. Could nothing be easy? He released the empty clip, spinning around carefully on the ground as more bullets carved their way into the front of the limestone bench. The edges were getting slowly chipped away, and as Techno slid his still chained hand along the metal pole, he could feel a bullet whiz dangerously close to his fingers. Still, he made his way to the other side, his back pressed up against stone, and reached out to grab onto the foot of a fallen police officer lying close nearby. With some effort, he dragged the man closer to him, his body scraping across the pavement. But before he was finally able to reach to his belt to obtain the man's spare clip, he saw a gun pointed at him out of the corner of his eye and quickly ducked to avoid their line of sight. Instead of the policeman's ammunition, Techno tactfully dived for the small grenade pinned to the officer's waist, yanking it out of place before peeking over the edge of the bench. The gunman was still there, making his approach, and Techno wasted no time pulling the pin and giving it a toss. It immediately exploded upon hitting the ground at the mercenary's feet, and he was easily blown away, sprawling across the stone. If not dead, then at least unconscious. But just as he seemed to be in the clear, at least for a moment, Techno turned to see the mercenary's blue van come careening around a corner, heading straight for him. I know where we are in the movie. Sure, why not? If they couldn't shoot him, they could at least run him over. Now, Techno wasted no time in diving for the policeman's extra clip, pinning his pistol in between his knees and slamming the magazine into the grip. Then he flipped it around, lowering the slide to his bottom of his boot, and cocked the weapon by jamming it against the sole of his shoe. It was only then that he finally stood, whipping the gun around and aiming through the windshield of the van, trying his best to hit the driver. But as the van kept revving forward, he finally lowered the pistol to his cuffs and pulled the trigger again. This time, the gun recoiled, chains snapping under the bullet like they were made of twig, before Techno darted out of the way, vaulting into some bushes. Just as the blue van came crashed straight into... Okay, listen, this part in the movie, Ryan Gosling does like this funny little anime girl jump into bushes. Or like a ninja jump or something. It's just so funny. It's so funny and it makes me smile. The jump! The jump is the jump. Can we make that an emote? Danny, we should make that an emote. Oh my gosh. Oh my golly, it's too funny. It's too good. Oh my gosh. Okay. Crashed straight into the bench he'd been pressed against and pitched forward into a railing, finally coming to a halt. Techno looked back at the vehicle for a moment, satisfied, before pulling some leaves from his hair and ducking deeper into the greenery, weaving his way around them as he glanced out to see where the other mercenaries were, pinning them down with his eyes. There were quite a few of them left, and you couldn't fight them all out in the open, not with just a lone pistol. His eyes searched for a solution, thoughts racing as he suddenly spotted an empty tram. I've been on a tram before, they're so fun. Still gliding down the road despite all the chaos, and he kept himself low as he headed toward it, slipping on board before finally coming to lay down on the cold metallic floor. He knew he only had a few seconds to catch his breath, but he wanted nothing more than to close his eyes and fall asleep again. Despite the extended nap that Soot had put him through earlier in the trunk of his car, his body had been through a lot in the past 36 hours, and he was struggling to keep up with all the action Dream was putting him through. Despite his place at the agency, he'd never been hunted like this before, and he was hating every second of it. He hadn't been lying when he'd asked Filza about an exit strategy. He just never imagined there would be so much running involved. Your syndicate. You'll be disposable. Well, they certainly were going through a hell lot of trouble to get rid of him. A hell of a lot of trouble to get rid of him. Yeah, yeah, I love him. Just then, Techno heard the scuff of boots on the pavement outside and lifted himself just enough to peek out the window. Sure enough, one of the mercenaries was passing by, gun lifted as he scanned each car of the tram. And Techno rolled his eyes as he lay back down on the floor, positioning himself sideways so his gun was pointing through the nearest open door. He waited patiently, counting the paces, seeing a shadow flicker across the window above him, before finally seeing the man's form coming into view, and popped 2 caps in him, the mercenary letting out a shout before falling to the ground. At that, Techno was immediately rolling back to his feet, and watching through the windows as more gunmen came racing toward the vehicle and began clambering on board. One just so happened to enter right in front of Techno, carrying a bulletproof shield, and although he quickly lifted his gun to pull a bullet in him, the man lifted his shield just in time to protect himself from getting impaled. Unfortunately for him, a body shield doesn't protect everything, and Techno just as quickly aimed his gun toward the man's ankle and took out his leg. He collapsed to the side, Techno finally reaching over his shield to put a bullet through his chest before ripping the metal plate out of his grasp. Then he quickly turned, holding it out in front of him as 2 more men came from behind, their bullets ricocheting off the front of the shield, Techno's own gunfire ricocheting off of theirs. He slowly backed away from them, no use fighting when he couldn't get a shot off, and as he slipped into the next car, he broke the emergency glass with the grip of his pistol and pressed the red button, causing the doors between the cars to snap close. He knew it wouldn't hold them there for long, but it would at least be long enough for him to deal with whoever was toward the front of the tram. So he kept moving forward, shifting his balance as the tram turned a corner up ahead, and carefully keeping his ballistic shield and gun raised. He could see movement ahead of him, the flicker of dark clothing through the glass windows. He aimed toward the shape, waiting for the tram to straighten out before finally catching a full glimpse of the mercenary, only taking 3 shots before finally managing to put him down. Then he was shifting forward again, trying to see if there was anyone else on board, before something suddenly caught the corner of his eye, something outside of the tram, and looked up just in time to see a blocky black Jeep come racing up alongside the glass windows, with a man sticking his head out of the top of the vehicle, leveling a machine gun directly towards the pane of glass Techno was standing behind. It took him a second for his brain to catch up, as a second he apparently didn't have, because the gunman immediately raked his barrel across the spread of windows, loud fire erupting from the barrel and shattering the glass. Techno pulled his shield up just in time, running down the aisle of the tram and trying to get further away from the source of the bullets. But as the tram shifted balance again, he lost footing and went down, landing on the glass-scattered floor once more. That was when he heard it, the loud rev of an engine of someone else joining the race. Race? Is that a Full Throttle reference? Oh my gosh! Cat, if you're still here, that one's for you, bestie. And the sudden crash of one vehicle slamming into another. He scrambled to his feet, peering out of the now glass-free window and raising his pistol, only to see a red sports car sending the Jeep spinning out, pushing it out of the road with a well-paced slam into its bumper. Techno felt confusion and surprise flicker over him, gun jerking instinctively toward the driver's seat as the window suddenly rolled down, only to reveal a familiar set of brown eyes and silver spectacles. Now, the car is actually red in the movie. We didn't actually take that from Full Throttle, but this is like the car action chase scene. It's so good. Oh my goodness. Immediately he lowered his gun, letting out a breath that he didn't realize he'd been holding as he took in Soot's urgent expression. But before he could even bother to pose the question of, "How the fuck did you find me?" the agent was already shouting at him over the roar of the wind. I am still here. Look at little, get ready for it. Yay! Jump! And he would have if another vehicle didn't suddenly slam up along the other side of the tram, this time a silver van, and deposit. I can't read. And deposit another mercenary. No, I did not just say desposit. Someone canceled me on Twitter. This is just ridiculous. And deposit another mercenary through one of the now open windows. He immediately tackled Techno, grabbing onto his gun before shoving his shield out of the way, trying to slam a fist into his face, but Techno blocked with ease, jamming his elbow into the mercenary's temple in return and causing him to stumble backward. Techno was up on his feet again in the next second, lifting his gun toward the man. But his adversary was quick to recover, wrapping an arm around Techno's wrist and tugging him forward before knocking the pistol out of his grasp. It skidded across the floor, and Techno tried his best to lunge for it, but the man snapped his elbow back into Techno's mouth before he could, causing the agent to flinch away, a hand instinctively coming up to feel the now bleeding cut on his bottom lip. As he did, the mercenary quickly dug a hand into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade, twirling it skillfully through his fingers before resting on an underhand grip. He swung it through the air, Techno leaning back to avoid the blade cutting across his face, before grabbing his arm and yanking him forward with the momentum of the tram. The man lost all his footing, and Techno used it to his advantage, letting the man fly out the same window he'd leapt in from, watching him land on the pavement below in a heap. Well, that didn't last long, Techno commented absently, before more bullet fire erupted from the back of the train. Right. Those guys he'd left behind earlier. He'd almost forgotten about them. He quickly ducked the shots, folding himself into the corner near the tram car door, and picking up his pistol, before glancing outside briefly to see Soot's red sports car still keeping up with him, tailed closely by the black Jeep, who apparently caught up with them while Techno had been dealing with the worst knife fight he'd ever experienced. The machine gun was now busy plastering holes into the back of Soot's trunk, and as the agent shot him a desperate look, Techno quickly pointed forward, telling him to pull up more. Soot gave him a quick nod of acknowledgement, slamming down on the gas and speeding forward, and as he did, Techno turned back around to take care of the gunman and on his ass. Oh my gosh. Ducking around the corner of the wall and letting a shot bury itself into the man's torso. Then, just as quickly, he watched as Soot pull forward just enough to get the black Jeep into his line of sight, and with expertly placed aim, he took out the driver in 3 shots. The black Jeep careened off the road, slamming into a wall of parked cars before flipping in the air, crashing down with a force that had its entire structure crumbling. Before Soot was slowing down again, pulling closer where Techno was still sitting in the doorway with another urgent look. Techno quickly knocked the remaining glass out of the door's window with the barrel of his gun, trying to clear a safe enough path to jump through. Before finally standing up and readying his feet to take the leap. They were traveling fast, maybe 50 miles per hour, and Techno didn't really want to know what pavement felt like if he were to miss, so he carefully grabbed onto the door frame and leaned out as far as he could, wanting to gain as much ground as possible. Unfortunately, just as he did, the silver van came zooming up in front of them, and as Techno turned to look at it, the back doors flew open to reveal a man holding a giant double-barrel grenade launcher. Despite being fucking ridiculous, it didn't change the fact that the gun was swiveling directly towards them. And Techno quickly pushed himself backward, falling onto the floor of the cable car just as Soot swerved away, letting the first shot of the launcher blow up right in between them. The impact rocked the tram, but as it evened out again, Techno shot back up to his feet, glancing out the window just in time to see Soot pull up alongside him again. Sirens were now blaring in the distance, a police car coming up fast from behind them, and as they zipped past an intersection, Techno caught a glimpse of another one trying to catch them from their side. He knew Soot saw it too, and unfortunately also the mercenary who was handling the grenade launcher, because in an instant, something went whizzing toward the police vehicle and sent it flying into the air with a loud explosion, right in Soot's lane. The red sports car suddenly screeched as Soot slammed down on the brakes, causing the police car behind him to crash head-on into one that had just exploded. And as the tram continued to speed by, Techno flew toward the window to peer back at the agent, just to make sure he was okay. From the looks of it, neither of the vehicles had crashed into him, and Techno let out a quick breath of relief before hearing some grunting from behind him. That's right. One more. He tore his eyes back toward the window and quickly reached up to grab the frame, before pulling himself outside and using the structure to climb onto the top of the tram. I love this part. For the moment outside was probably... Oh, sorry, I'm like reading it way too fast. Punctuation is a thing for a reason, guys. For the moment, outside was probably better than in, and this way he could get a better view of Soot when he finally managed to catch up. That was until the guy with the fucking grenade launcher decided it was time to shoot at the tram. He aimed directly at the front of the vehicle and blew it away, causing the entire thing to jolt, sending Techno face first into the metal as he lost his footing once more. He dove through a plume of smoke before it was promptly torn away by the wind, and when he finally managed to glance up, he caught the reflection of the tram in the glass-sided... Oh! This is the part. He caught the reflection of the tram in the glass-sided window. Wow, glass-sided building. To his left of him, and saw that the whole front of the car was lit ablaze. He also saw the last mercenary that was creeping up on him, gun aiming through the ceiling as if waiting for a sign. And like the killer he was trained to be, Techno carefully sat up, still staring at the reflection as he angled his pistol through the center of his legs and let out a single bullet puncture through the roof of the tram. The mercenary fell to the ground, before Techno suddenly saw a familiar red car go zipping by, and turned to follow it with his gaze, only to see the silver van with the grenade launcher aimed directly at his face. If you create book reader for audiobooks, oh, thank you! That's so sweet of y'all to say! I would really love to get into that sort of business, so if anyone has any links of jobs like that, hit me up, put it in the Discord, DM me on Twitter. Silverman with a grenade launcher aimed directly at his face. He was about to duck, not really wanting to go up in a fiery blaze, when soot rammed into its side, knocking it in front of the tram and causing the vehicles to collide into each other. The grenade launcher still went off, but instead of hitting Techno, it was knocked to the left, the explosion hitting a building on the opposite side of the street. That was when he felt the tram give a violent jolt, the whole line of cars careening off the track and shrieking across the pavement as its trajectory began to change, heading directly toward a line of pillars that were holding up the facade of a nearby building. Oh my goodness. This whole action scene is just incredible. Bum, 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 bum. All right. Immediately, Techno was on his feet again, running back toward the end of the tram and jumping in between cars as the whole thing began to collide with the structure. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught that same glint of red and turned to see Soot speeding back toward him in reverse. Techno wished he had more time to line up the jump, more time to think about this crazy stunt he was about to pull off before actually attempting it. But the day ago, he jumped out of a fucking airplane without a parachute on, so what was one more risk? Throwback to this part where we had to figure out the timeline of Pinkman. It was so funny. I'll have to put the meme in the screenshots that I took. It's so funny. Oh man. He was nearing the end of the tram now, and with nothing left to run on, he glanced down just in time to watch Soot jerk the steering wheel to the side, the hood of the car spinning out to face Techno, a nice metal landing pad right there for him to land on. And he finally took the leap. He touched down hard on top of the metal sports car just as the end of the tram began to flip, the cable car grazing dangerously over his head before finishing its forward collision, metal crashing against stone with a grinding screech. Then, just like that, everything settled. Dust slowly floating down to the ground, and Techno felt himself just lay there for a moment, the wind knocked out of him, trying to catch his breath. The hot hood of the car bit into his palms, his cheek pressed into cool glass. And when he finally managed to gather enough strength to lift his head, the first thing he saw was Soot's eyes, trained on him with unbidden concern. It was the first real emotion Techno had seen on the kid's face, as if he'd forgotten to hold back his expression for once, as if all the walls he'd put up between them had finally come crashing down. And Techno couldn't help but stare back at him, relief filling his bones as he finally registered that the kid was okay. Gently, he pushed himself up and off the hood, sliding down with a soft groan until he was standing on 2 feet again. He walked a few paces away, trying to steady himself after practically getting crushed to death, before finally giving the area one last sweep with his eyes, just to make sure they were really in the clear. When it didn't look like anyone else was about to attack them, he finally traipsed over to the passengers... Traipsed over to the passenger's side door and reached out to the handle, opening it up with a pop, before finally ducking inside. He settled carefully into the seat, casting a glance over at Soot, who was also breathing heavily, hands still gripping the steering wheel and eyes wide with adrenaline, before finally glancing back toward the empty road ahead of them with a deep breath and muttering a flat, "Thanks." Soot just nodded back at him, seemingly at loss for words, before slowly lowering his hand down on the gear shift and pushing it into drive. Oh my gosh! Quite the action scene we just finished there, guys. We're about to wrap up this chapter, so hope y'all are still awake to see what happens next. All teams, report status. Dream waited, but there was no response. Every comm was down, every camera was offline, and as the silence dragged on, he only grew more impatient. All teams, he repeated, report status. This is possibly the most spectacular failure in the history of covert ops. Grogs. Oh my gosh, thank you, anonymous viewer, for gifting a sub to Everly. Welcome, thank you for that sub. I really appreciate it. Editing. Grogs. Grogs. It's just funny. This, I gotta sell this act, guys. I gotta sell this line. This is the moment. George's voice rose from the front of the room, low and quiet, something dark boiling just underneath the surface. And Dream slowly lifted his head to look at him, their eyes crashing into each other for a moment, their gazes raging in a silent, deadly storm. This was the reason their partnership had never worked. This was volatile. This was hatred. This will be taught in schools, George continued, slowly turning toward him, his voice getting louder, as the primary example of exactly what not to do in asset retrieval. Dream paced away, tearing his eyes away from the wrath in George's snarl, anger etched on his face like blood, his words stinging, seething. But Dream said nothing in response. He only clenched his jaw down tightly, trying to think of his next move. He wanted Blade dead. He wanted him snuffed out yesterday, but Dream wasn't a failure. He refused to be. He had built up his reputation from nothing, from the ashes and rubble of what the CIA had left him with, and he wouldn't bend to them now. Schlatt and George had come crawling to him for his help, and he was nothing if not capable of taking down one rogue asset. He would come up with something, anything, to take this pig-headed bastard down. And then, like music to his ears, he heard static pick up on the attached comm line, and a voice filter through saying, "This is Sapnap. Over." Dream halted in his tracks, a grin starting to crawl over his lips as he lifted his head and responded, "Hello, my sexy Texan friend." His eyes moved toward the monitor, where a picture suddenly flickered to life on the screen, and he could see his last mercenary driving, phone camera stuck somewhere in his dash, but there nonetheless. His silhouette remained familiar, dressed in an old Western suit, white with tacky orange flames stretching over the shoulders, and a wide-brimmed cowboy hat. His collar tied together with a black bolo tie. Well-trained, well-dressed, never missed a mark. Dream was almost ready to admit he might just have some faith in the man. "Situation report?" he asked, taking a step closer to the screen, a grin still tugging at his lips. "Tracking the target," Sapnap replied steadily, eyes still on the road ahead of him, turning the wheel with ease. Dream nodded, something dark and twisted trickling into his veins, something like revenge. "No change, Sapnap," he said. "Get me that asset." George turned to stare at him, disbelieving, face full of horror. But Dream simply turned back toward him, his maniacal smile taking its full shape. "What I do," he finally taunted, voice cutting through the air like a blade, "can't be taught." And then we're gonna end on a high note with Twins duo. Yeah. Techno could still hear sirens wailing behind them as they drove, but thankfully this time, the police weren't after them, instead heading in the opposite direction, back toward where the tram line had derailed. Still, he watched the soot cast a nervous glance in the rear view, watching the blue lights whiz by, before he was suddenly turning a sharp corner and pulling into the nearest parking space. It was a good choice. Oh my goodness, excuse me, I have the hiccups. It was a good choice to lay low for a minute as the authorities rushed to the scene. But when the agent finally turned to look at him, Techno realized that wasn't the only reason he'd pulled to the side of the curb. "You hurt?" he asked softly, eyes glancing Techno up and down, that same expression of concern coming back over his features. Techno blinked at him for a second before turning back to look out the front windshield, now smattered with a... Is it supposed to be smattered? I'm gonna say smattered. I didn't know that was a word. Let's look it up. Can I double click? Or do I not? Never mind. Okay, never mind. I have Grammarly disabled. No smattered with a spiderweb of cracks. His body ached, sure, and his head was still spinning a little from when he'd hit the pavement, but other than that, he was good, which in itself was a miracle, one he didn't intend on taking for granted. I mean, my ego's a little bruised, he finally admitted, before casting a sideways glance towards Soot. I would like the opportunity to save you at some point. Soot snorted, and the tiny laugh brought with it an unwilling fondness Techno hadn't felt, well, since Tommy. And Techno quickly tried to hide his own smile in response, turning back toward the windshield as he carefully tagged on, "Not that I want you to be in danger, just so I can save you." Soot nodded slowly, before the smile slowly fell from his lips, and he turned toward Techno once more. "Puffy?" he asked softly. There was silence, one that should have held all the answers, but after a few long moments, Techno just shook his head, refusing to meet the agent's gaze, and heard Soot let out a painful sigh, watching his hands tighten around the steering wheel out of the corner of his eye. He waited patiently for the inevitable "I'm sorry," but when it never came, he felt his eyes flickering back over to the agent, who easily returned his gaze, something determined and bitter beginning to stir just behind his irises. "You said they have a kid," he stated, resolve seeping into every one of his words. Techno shifted in his seat, glancing away again before finally whispering a soft, "Yeah," something flaring up in his chest as he resisted the urge to tag on, "My kid." I forgot about that part. Ow. Everything hurts and I'm dying. "How do we find him?" Techno turned over his shoulder, staring Soot down for a beat, and checking to see if there was any doubt whether or not he could trust the agent in front of him. Techno had never had a partner before, because he never really needed one. He was meant to be unattached and efficient, to focus solely on the mission, on the job, on his mark. He was the best at what he did. He was meant to work alone and die alone, and no matter how lonely a life it was, somewhere along the line, he'd learned to just accept that. So when the fuck had he started to trust again? Soot had been there since the very beginning, hadn't he? Since 2 days ago when Techno had first taken the medallion from Puns, since he mixed his exfil in Bangkok, since Vienna and now Prague. He was smart and skilled, and damn, he could drive. Besides, he'd saved Techno's life more than a few times now. He could tell the agent was genuine, could tell that he had a good heart, and... Yo! Everly, thank you so much for the follow! I saw you were gifted a sub earlier tonight, so congrats! Welcome into the stream, and thank you for the follow. I hope you're having a lovely day, night, evening, every time zone maybe. Yes, you were! So exciting! But yes, we are wrapping up reading chapter 5 of The Pink Man. It is pinned in the message at the top of chat if you want to read along. But I have more of these little reading streams, if you're interested in them, on my VODs channel. So yeah, let's wrap this freaking chapter up. Where did we leave off? And damn, he could drive. Besides, he'd saved Techno's life more than a few times now. He could tell the agent was genuine, could tell that he had a good heart and a bright future, and damn it, if his stupid fucking accent didn't sound just like Techno's kid. The truth was, Techno was pretty sure he trusted him from the very beginning. So slowly, he held up his hand, showing Wilbur the 6-digit serial number he'd gotten back in Vienna before finally murmuring, "He's got a pacemaker." Then, spotting the glint of silver metal still clamped around his wrist, he leveled another long look at his partner and asked with a wry smile, "You don't have a handcuff key, do you?" And that is the end of chapter 5 of The Pink Man. Oh my gosh! And then we have little notes here. Yeah, school had us in a chokehold for a while. We're back at it. The railing The railing ridiculousness of the D team in this chapter is 100% intentional. We hope they look silly as they do IRL/neg. Be sure to leave kudos and leave a comment. I love reading y'all's stuff. Oh my goodness. Guys, we finished the chapter. Yay! Oh my golly. Oh, now the bee is gonna freak out. Dude, he's gonna spaz out. Whoa. Oh man. Oh man. I love this fic. I love writing it. I'm excited to get back to it. But oh my gosh, you guys. I'm so glad y'all like that. Guys, be sure to join. That's Instagram. My bad. I meant to click Discord. Be sure to be in on the Discord to get notifications about when I post on this. Be sure to follow Danny. Let me give a shout out. Be sure to follow Danny here on Twitch, and there is another chapter out already if you want to read on. I am going to be reading that out loud on another SBI Sunday. So, yeah. That'll be fun. I hope y'all got some fun, relaxing vibes tonight. I know I sure did, like, cause I'm eepy. So why don't we go ahead and... Oh my gosh, Mads is live. No one panic, Mads is live. Okay, Minecraft, but why is Minecraft but moist? That is the title of Mads's chat, Mads's thing. That's okay. So, without further ado, guys, here is the raid command. And if you have a sub, you can copy this one. Oh my gosh, look at all the... Gonna eat them. Oh my goodness. Yes, thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad y'all liked it. Danny and I... We slay. But yes, we're going to raid Mads. Copy that little thingy in there. Okay. Mads... XP. The lag monster's eating me. Blah! Alright, we're gonna raid Mads. Be sure to join the raid. Send Mads my love. I think they just got back from vacation, so yeah, slay. But yes, without further ado, I want to try and be live again tomorrow, so maybe we'll do some fun Minecrafty things or something. So be sure to join the Discord and hit the follow button if you haven't already. Be sure to follow Danny on all of her social medias as well. But yes, okay, I'll hit y'all with the outro. Guys, without further ado, remember chat, you are wonderful, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are so worthy, and I love you all very, very much. And I'll see you all in the next stream.